The law of God governs the entire universe. This is the same law that Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob followed. This law was codified through Moses on Mount Sinai. Today, this law is all but forgotten in America. Discover how this law can bring you either blessings or curses. Learn how this perfect law of liberty can be followed today.
Okay, we're going to go over the last 5 commandments, but we're not going to go in order. There's a reason for it. Here's a quick outline of where we're going. We're going to talk about policy of the 10 commandments, about property rights, perjury, and intent. Then we're going to talk about thou shalt not steal, theft, fraud, negligence, money, business, contracts, inheritance, charity, third tithe, usury, and disability. All those fit in there somewhere. And then under thou shalt not steal, we're going to talk about restitution, which is how you fix theft. Restitution, slavery, bond servitude, hired servants, land sabbath, year of release, and the year of jubilee. So that's where we're going. You'll see why I'm going in reverse order for the last 5. Because I think you need to understand number 10 and number 9 before you can understand the other 3. Because I'm going to show you a different understanding of number 10. You guys probably already know what I'm going to say about number 9. But that's all about policy of how God's law is administered. The first 8 are God's law. 9 and 10 are policy. Okay, so let's get started. Before we begin, I know you're tired of this slide already, but I'm going to do it anyways. God's law is good for us. We always need to remember that. It's for our good always, that it might preserve us alive as it is at this day. The law of God defines righteous living. It does not give us righteousness, but it does define our righteousness. It tells us how to act. The only way to understand God's law is to do God's law. Psalm 111:10 is one of my favorite verses. A good understanding of all they that do His commandments. And James said the same thing, and kind of in the reverse, be doers of the word and not hearers only, because it deceives you if you don't. When studying the law of God, we err when we treat it as a religion. It is a law and needs to be studied as law. I think that's very important. The religion throws us for a loop every time. Israel was a nation, not a church. This is a big one also. We need to compare Israel with other nations. The law of God is a national law. Mark and I were just talking about this, and it really changes your thinking about a lot of God's law. So instead of looking at Israel and the church, we're going to look at Israel and America, because that's really the comparison I think God wants us to make. And then finally, the law of God is compared to a mirror, and it should be used to look back at yourself and not towards others. It's the perfect law of liberty. If that mirror is pointing towards someone else, you're taking away someone's liberty. We have freedom in God's law, and we need to always remember that. The only time we should really call someone out is when their sin causes a damage, which isn't as often as we'd think, to be honest. Okay, so a quick Mosaic Law overview. I started in 2008. It took several years. I came up with 756 commandments, statutes, and judgments, and I'll be honest, that's changing as I'm teaching this, but it's somewhere around there. There's 87 titles of law. They all fit under the 10 commandments, which fit under the 2 greatest commandments, and that came from the Messiah himself. These 2 commandments hang all the law and the prophets. What we've looked at so far are the first 5 commandments. The first 5 commandments relate to God and how our relationship is with Him, and the last 5 commandments relate to us and how our relationship is with each other. So today we're going to talk about you shall not steal, you shall not bear false witness, and you shall not covet. Notice how there's only 1 statute in each of these. You can probably put a few more in number 9. But number 10, you won't find anything but the 1. At least I couldn't find anything but the one. And I labeled it intent for a reason. These last two are policy. They dictate policy of the Mosaic Law. I think you'll see that as we go. So the last 5 commandments are all about property. I don't know if you recognize that, but God's law is all about property. It's been said by several people in the past, property is the holy grail of law. Everything's about property and property rights. What is property? Property is the highest right a man can have to anything, being used for that right which one has to lands or tenements, goods or chattels, which no way depends on another man's courtesy. It's not the lands and tenements, goods or chattels. It's the right to them. It's a different way of thinking. We like to call this is my property. This isn't my property. My property is my right to this. And that's a different way of thinking. It's the right and interest which a man has in lands and chattels to the exclusion of others. So this is mine and I can choose to not let you use it.
That's right.
It's my right. I can be selfish with it. I don't have to let anybody use it. It is the right to enjoy and to dispose of. So I can go smash this with a sledgehammer if I want to get rid of it that way and burn it in my fire pit. And because it's mine, you can't get mad at me for doing that. I have the right to enjoy and dispose of it how I desire. It is the right to enjoy and dispose of certain things in the most absolute manner as he pleases, provided he makes no use of them prohibited by law. So as long as it's not going to damage someone else's property and there's not a law against it. All things are not the subject of property. The sea, the air, and the like cannot be appropriated. What is the subject of property? This is the subject of property. It's not property. The item is the subject of property. That's what we're talking about. Okay? Sea, air, and the like, obviously, I guess you can call it like a public property. Everybody has a right to that. I can't stop you from... If this were my building, I couldn't say, you can't breathe my air. That wouldn't be fair, because we all have a right to live. This is because the heaven and the heaven of heavens is the Lord's, and the earth also, with all that therein is. Everything belongs to God. And I don't know if you recognize this, but our governments run the nation that way. Everything belongs to God. I think you'll see that as you go through this. I'll explain it in a minute. So, property is not the house or the goat or the tractor. That's the subject of property. Property is our right to use those things. This isn't ours. This stuff belongs to God. And that's the way our law reads. The last 5 commandments establish all property rights. The last 5 commandments are: you shall not murder, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not steal, you shall not bear false witness, and you shall not covet. Murder, do you not have a property right to breathe? Don't you have if you don't think of it as a physical thing, don't you have a right to breathe and live and live your life? All the health statutes fit under there as property. You shall not commit adultery. Do we not have property rights in our spouses? We're one now, right? My wife's body belongs to me, and my body belongs to her. The scripture clearly says that. We have a property right in each other. You shall not steal is clearly property rights. The other two, they're based on property rights, but it's about policy. So let's see if this makes sense. To understand property, we must first understand the tabernacle. So one slide on the tabernacle. The tabernacle had 3 purposes, remember? It was a hospital, it was food regulation, and it was a judicial system. We're going to talk about the judicial system part real quick. I just want to remind you of the 2 offerings for the judicial system so that we understand what's going on. But first, just as some support, this is our temple. See the 2 veils? We're doing it today. This is our Supreme Court. It's the same system. Can you guys see the connection? I like using this as a simple way just to show that we're doing. It even has the pillars that the scripture mentions. Everything about it is the same system. Okay, so our Supreme Court is our temple. In our temple, we do sin offerings. It's a courtroom. The sin offering is the penalty for breaking God's law. That's all it is. It's the penalty for breaking God's law. It's for sins of ignorance. So if you committed a sin in ignorance, you'd be giving a sin offering. Remember, sin means crime. It's breaking God's law. It's for any of God's commands. So you would give a sin offering for breaking any of God's commands. You could, depending on whether the judge decided that. Only done when the sinner was found to be guilty. Okay? That means a trial took place, right? It was in the holy place, because the priest would not go into the holy place without the breastplate of judgment. Every time he went in the holy, he had to have that judgment, because he was making a judgment. Or it was at the gate of the city, because that's where the tabernacle spread out, the lower court system. At the mouth of at least 2 witnesses. This is more evidence it was a trial, so there was at least 2 witnesses. And they must be found guilty. I already went over that. So it's a trial. You don't do the sin offering without a trial. The trespass offering is the same thing. It's a penalty for breaking God's law. It's for sins of ignorance. So there's some parallel here. They both have sins of ignorance. But the trespass offering is also for sins of intent. Okay? Sins of intent. You know that it doesn't say the word intent, but if a soul commit a trespass against the Lord, he's lying, taking by violence, deceived his neighbor, swears falsely, took by violence, deceitfully gotten, sworn falsely. These are all sins of intent. You purposely do them. You don't just accidentally do it. You don't take something by violence accidentally. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. Sorry. It doesn't happen that way. These are sins of intent. It's also for any of God's commands. And if a soul sin, commit any of these things which are forbidden to be done by the commandments of the Lord. Only done when the sinner was found to be guilty. So this is a trial as well. Carries punitive damages. That's the difference between the sin and the trespass offering. It's after the shekels of the sanctuary. So when you get punitive damages, it's always after the shekels of the sanctuary. A misdemeanor is 4 times restored. And a felony is 5 times restored. We're actually going to go over those later, but you'll see what I mean by that. So these are the fines that a court system gives. The 9th and 10th commandments are policy. You shall not covet. What does that mean? The definition of covet. Covet is shamad, which means to desire, to covet, to take pleasure in, delight in. It's from Brown Driver Briggs and his definitions. Septuagint uses epithumeo, which means to set the heart upon, that is, long for, covet, desire, or lust after. Epithumia is a longing, especially for what is forbidden. These are the words translated as covet. These Greek words are used 38 times in the New Testament. Only twice is it used as the positive, but both are questionable. Do you remember when I talked about the Passover? Those are the 2 times it's not translated covet or lust or something like that. When the Messiah said, with desire I've desired to eat this Passover with you before I suffer. He said, coveting, I covet to eat this Passover with you. Was the Messiah guilty of the 10th commandment?
No.
Why not?
It wasn't for...
No, it has something to do with intent.
It does. Here's where I'm going with this, you guys. He didn't act on it.
He didn't act on
He did not act on it. Okay? Commonly thought to be a command to control our thoughts and mind. Does God endorse thought police? How would that work? God could enforce it, but this is a national law for the Levites to run the government with, right? No other biblical law attempts to legislate thoughts. At least none that I have found. None that I have found attempt to regulate thoughts. Couple of questions. How was this regulated? I already asked that, but how do you regulate coveting? How do you arrest someone for coveting?
Yeah, you can't see their...
How was a judge to determine coveting?
Yeah.
What's the penalty?
Yeah.
Could they read minds?
Premeditated.
You can't. Well, that's where I'm going. It does not mean we don't control our thoughts. I'm going to redefine coveting for us, but keep in mind, I'm not saying we shouldn't control our thoughts. That is a biblical doctrine. We should definitely do it. And bringing into captivity every thought to the obedience of Christ. Absolutely. We should always do that. But is that what coveting really means? Is that the intent of this law? This is what I would call the intent statute. We use this in law every day. Okay? Intent is a resolve to do or forbear a particular act. Do you see the similarities? Yeah. Intent shows the presence of will in the act which constitutes a crime. Every crime must have necessarily two constituent parts, namely an act forbidden by law and an intention. In criminal law, you must establish intent to prove guilt. We call that mens rea today. That means a guilty mind, a criminal or wrongful purpose, or a criminal intent. This is what coveting is this is what the Bible is meaning by covet. Categories of crimes in the Scripture. There are sins of ignorance, sins of intent, and sins of defiance. Sins of ignorance means the sinner does not know he has sinned and repents with a sin offering. It was an accident. He didn't know. Oops, I made a mistake, but I'm willing to repent because I don't want to break the law. It just happened. I'm sorry, I broke your fence. I was negligent, whatever it might be. It's a sin of ignorance. You would do a sin offering. A sin of intent, the sinner knows he has sinned but repents with a trespass offering. Now he's going to get punitive damages because he purposely sinned. That's what the trespass offering is. A sin of defiance, the sinner knows he has sinned, but no repentance is found in him. This is an act of treason. Doeth aught presumptuously. The two words for that phrase means a high hand and a fist. Saying, I'm doing this on purpose. I know what your law says, God, but I don't care. I'm going to do this anyways. And the penalties for this are death. It's unforgivable, or excommunication, which is expatriation. You're kicked out of Israel. That's the punishment for this. We're not really going to talk much about sins of defiance because the reality is they're out. You don't have to worry about them anymore. That's the penalty once that's determined. But the other two are kind of significant. This is the difference between a crime and an infraction. Okay, a crime is an offense against a public law. There are two categories. There's a felony, which is an offense which occasions a total forfeiture of lands or goods. Oh. It's punitive.
That's why they think everything.
Or both at common law, to which capital or other punishments may be superadded according to the degree of guilt. So it may be a capital felony. Okay, so there's different levels. And then there's a misdemeanor. Misdemeanors comprehending all indictable offenses which do not amount to a felony. So this is basically not quite bad enough to be a felony. So crime is split up into two categories. An infraction is a breach, violation, or infringement as of a law, a contract, a right, or a duty. Okay, so let's define these from scriptural terms. Well, so criminal law has felonies and misdemeanors. Infractions are a violation of law without criminal intent. That's what this commandment's all about. You'll notice 9 and 10 are about policy. Some definitions we need to know. Sin is the transgression of the law. 1 John 3:4 says that. It's an offense. An infraction is a breach, a violation, or infringement. Trespass, transgression, means to break away. Trespass, apostatize, offend, rebel, revolt, transgress. Do you see the difference in levels here? Trespass in our modern law means an injury or misfeasance to the person, property, or right of another person, done with force and violence, either actual or applied in law. And then iniquities in the Bible also. We're not going to talk much about this, but that's fault, iniquity, mischief, punishment. That's what that word means. If you'll trace this out, iniquity is a technical expression applied to the decision of an inferior judge who has decided contrary to law. So this is a judge sinning when he's given sentence. Okay? And if you trace out iniquity in the scripture, you'll see almost every time they got it right. This is one of the reasons I like using the King James, because they use these terms. And that's what they translate. Yeah. But let me show you the connection here. First, a sin is an infraction today. And a trespass is a crime. Even today, there is some overlap. So this is like a Venn diagram. Okay? In the Bible, a sin is a sin offering, and a trespass is a trespass offering. Even in the scripture, there is some overlap. Remember, this could be sins of ignorance, but this could be sins of ignorance or sins of intent. So there's some overlap. A judge has to make that call. How does he make that call? Coveting. That's how he makes that call. Look at the similarities between the trespass offering and covetousness. This is the trespass offering. Sin. I went over this. They lie. They take by violence. They deceived his neighbor. They swear falsely. They took violently away. They deceitfully gotten. They sworn falsely. Okay, so it's lying. It's taking by violence. It's deceptions. And it's swearing falsely. Look what covetousness is. The people that covet fields, they take by violence. They take them away. Oppress a man. Their thoughts are thoughts of iniquity, right? They have spoken lies, speak lies, conceive mischief, acts of violence. So look at the similarities. They speak lies, take by violence, devise iniquity, oppress men, conceive mischief, and have feet that run to evil. Do you see the connection between these two? The Bible doesn't directly connect them like you would want, but when you start to see the similarities, it's like, wow, coveting, the 9th and 10th commandment are policy. It's telling us how to understand the law.
Law of intent?
Yes, it's the intent. It determines what level of crime we're talking about. So this is the way I just worded it to help us understand. So thou shalt not covet means you shall not have intent to commit a crime, because intent will be held against you in court. Without establishing intent, which is coveting, there is no crime, but there may still be an infraction. So a judge is going to use this to determine what level of crime you're committing. And that's the sin offering or the trespass offering. Sin offering is a minor thing. You made a mistake, it was negligence, it's not that big of a deal. A trespass offering, maybe you did it in ignorance, but it was huge. Or maybe you had intent. And the judge's job, the priest's job, is to make that determination to try to solve the crime, just try to deter sin. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's the 10th commandment, because there's really no statutes that fit under it. So that's my opinion on the 10th commandment. I'm pretty convinced of it, and I think you could find that in our modern law. You just need to look up the word intent, and it pretty much tells you what coveting is. And 9 and 10 are used to construe the law. It's used as policy. 9 is perjury. We know that. That's not really, it's a sin. And like I said earlier, coveting, it's not good. We should control our thoughts, absolutely, because it leads to a serious sin. There's no doubt about it, but I don't think that's just what coveting is. I'm pretty sure it's to distinguish between the types of sin that we commit. So thou shalt not covet. This is just a quick summary. America still keeps this law, believe it or not. This is not thought crimes, though. Intent determines the nature of sin. This is the difference between manslaughter and murder. Moses committed manslaughter. He got mad because he saw an injustice and he went out and killed somebody. That's different than what David did. David committed murder. He wrote a letter. It probably took days to get to the war. He plotted and planned it and had him send Uriah to the front so that he would die in the harshest battle and had everybody draw back. This premeditated murder. That's pretty serious. Coveting is used to determine the difference between these two things. This determines the degree of sin.
Isn't the law of intent premeditation? Isn't that the way it's determined?
Criminal intent, there's a lot of premeditated murder is definitely intent, but it can be a lesser than premeditated murder also. But it depends on your heart, your motive. They're trying to read your intention. Right. And that's why some of the maxims of, I can't remember what it said, but something about some of the maxims of law, the one I put in the first presentation, it's reading the intent to base it on your actions, or your intent is proven by your actions. So they're looking for the letter.
Right.
That's proof. All they got to do is show proof of the letter. Okay, there's your intent. This is premeditated, David. That was a very serious crime, and we don't always recognize that. You shall not bear false witness. This is perjury. This one's not so hard to accept. The first one was a little difficult because it's different. But perjury is a lot more common than we think. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. A witness is aid. Concretely, a witness, abstractly, it's testimony. This is giving testimony. It's in court. Okay, I didn't put anything under this either for that very reason. I think it's just pretty much perjury. You shall not commit perjury. The punishment for perjury is the same punishment as he intended to do his brother. So if a false witness rise up and you find him false, then he's going to get the same thing that he was going to do unto him. He had thought to have done unto his brother. So then shall you do unto him as he had thought to have done unto his brother. That's a pretty cool punishment, don't you think? The witness is to cast the first stone in capital felonies. That's a brilliant law. How many people are going to commit perjury if you, in a capital felony, if you were the one that'd have to kill them? As I'm reading through, I'm going through my thoughts going, God's brilliant. He's just genius. The other two right there, you're going to get the punishment. The penalty under God's law is death. How many people are going to commit perjury knowing that? If it's a $100,000 fine, how many people are going to commit perjury knowing that if they're caught, they get that fine? Okay, and then when you have to cast the first stone, this is just brilliant. You can't think of two better laws to make sure it doesn't happen. Rochelle laughs at me a lot because I sit at my coffee table and relax and I'm studying. And when something comes to me like this, and you just realize how brilliant God is, she'll just see me laugh and I just put my hands on me. I'm just like, oh my gosh. He is brilliant. Because this would solve all of our problems if we just do these simple little things. You know, it's just amazing.
There's no consequence today.
There isn't. You know, it's just a slap on the wrist, and therefore there's no harm in doing it. You know, God's law is harsh and brutal. It is. But it protects everybody as a result. A few people are going to die as a result. That's just the reality. But the whole nation's going to be better for it.
Change the nation.
Yeah, it will. This would change the nation. It sure would. America still keeps this law. It's called Title 18. Whoever, having taken an oath, and will testify, declare, depose, or certify truly, and subscribe any material matter which he does not believe to be true. So if you don't believe it to be true, that's perjury. Or in a declaration, certificate, verification, or statement, willfully subscribe as true any material matter which he does not believe to be true. So it can be verbal or written, is guilty of perjury and shall be fined or imprisoned. That penalty is nothing compared to God's. It's based on the level of the trial that you're at. And it couldn't be more brilliant. We have the right law. The problem is we have the wrong punishment. And that right there would solve a lot of our problems. A whole bunch of them. You shall not steal. Now here's the eighth one, and this is the bulk of this presentation. You shall not steal is the foundation of all property rights. It's the foundation of all property rights. That's why God put it in there. Theft has two statutes. That's the main one. Just directly stealing from someone is what this is clearly talking about. Theft takes away a property right. I probably don't have to convince anybody of that. You shall not steal another's goods. Thou shalt not steal. This requires an owner. The owner is the person in whom is vested the ownership, dominion, or title of property. Ownership is the complete dominion, title, or proprietary right in a thing or claim. Remember, the things is not the property. Property is the right. The ownership of a thing is the right of one or more persons to possess and use it to the exclusion of others. Theft is an unlawful, felonious taking away of another man's movable and personal goods against the will of the owner. Notice how in law they never say taking another man's property? No, because property is not the thing. The subject of property is the thing, and that's the movable and personal goods. You have to have an owner. Lost property, I love this one. Lost property is to be taken care of and returned to the rightful owner. Do you know God invented lost and found? He did. It's a law. He said, thou shalt not see your brother's ox or his sheep go astray, and hide yourself from them. Thou shalt in any case bring them again unto thy brother. And if your brother be not nigh unto thee, or if thou know him not, then you shall bring it unto thine own house. And it shall be with you until your brother seek after it, and you shall restore it to him again. Is that not lost and found? In like manner shalt thou do with his donkey, and so shall you do with his raiment, and with all lost thing of your brothers. That's a commandment. We're supposed to do this. Isn't that amazing? It's a good thing we have a lost and found here at Rock Valley.
Some Bibles sit there a long.
Well, you know what? But that, I'm sure there's within reason for everything.
Yeah.
So obviously, if it's been there 10 years, they're probably not going to come back, donate it to somebody. But that's the spirit of the law. That's the correct understanding of it. We should make every attempt to get the property back. Property rights are very important to God, and we don't look at it that way today. For some reason, we've lost sight of that in the church. Fraud has two statutes. There's an important distinction to make. Fraud consists of some deceitful practice or willful device resorted to with intent to deprive another of his right or in some manner to do him an injury. Is fraud an infraction or a crime?
Crime.
It's a crime. The intent's clearly right there. They have to prove intent for it to be fraud. Negligence is the omission to do something which a reasonable man, guided by those considerations which ordinarily regulate the conduct of human affairs, would do. So what a reasonable man would do, or doing something which a prudent and reasonable man would not do. Is there anything about intent or will in this statute? No, there's a difference here. Fraud is a higher level. Negligence is a much lower level. Is negligence an infraction or a crime? It's obviously not a crime. There's no intent involved. So fraud takes away a property right. You shall not defraud your neighbor. Okay, neither deal falsely with them. Thou shalt not defraud your neighbor. This is always with intent to steal. And you shall also not go about speaking slander or spreading false reports about others. Thou shalt not go up and down as a talebearer among thy people. This is slander. This is intent to damage a reputation. You're purposely doing that to hurt someone when you're spreading lies about them. And your reputation is big in God's law. I don't know if you guys realize that, but reputation is huge when you get down to it in God's law. We'll see that later. Negligence has 5 statutes. Negligence also takes away a property right, but it's different than a crime. You see the distinction I'm trying to make? There's just different levels, and that's what coveting's all about. If a man causes damage through negligence, he shall pay for all damages. Okay? If a man shall open a pit, or if a man shall dig a pit and not cover it, and an ox or an ass fall therein, the owner of the pit shall make it good. This is negligence. It's not intentionally, he didn't intentionally try to hurt somebody. This is only if an animal falls in. If you dug a pit and you didn't cover it and no animal fell in, are you guilty of negligence yet?
No.
It's got to be a damage. Got to be a damage. And that's just the way all law works. Yes, Abe?
But if the animal was on the wrong property and it fell in?
Well, you should have a fence around your property then, I guess is what he's saying.
Swimming pool,
You know what I'm saying? I guess you could say if the bull busted through your fence that you tried to warn people with and busted through whatever warning you put, then that would be an exception to this. But that's the reality. If we have something dangerous, so we're going to go over some of the others, but God listed several different examples, and we're supposed to use them as examples. The rail around your roof, just intent. If you don't have a rail around your roof, you're not guilty until someone falls off. The cops aren't going to come up, oh, you don't have, well, actually in America we might do that. That's where we're going with the Roman civil law. That's the difference between common law and Roman civil law. We're going towards regulation instead of rights. That's the difference between common law and civil law. Civil law is about regulation. You're guilty. You went over 65. Well, who to hurt? Nobody, but you're still guilty. God's law doesn't work that way. You have to cause a damage. So he doesn't need speed limits. He just says you got to pay for every kid you kill. And it's life for life. Well, that's going to straighten you out pretty quick. Seriously. When you get to the school zone, you're going to go, oh, I better not hit the 100 kids walking this way because I got to pay life for life. So you don't need to write speed laws. You just need to hold everybody accountable to his harsh penalties. The death penalty for negligence requires knowledge. you can get the death penalty for negligence. If an ox gore a man or a woman that they die, then the ox shall surely be stoned, and his flesh shall not be eaten, but the owner of the ox shall be quit. But if the ox were wont to push with his horn in time past, and it has been testified to his owner, so the owner knows, and he has not kept him in, then he has killed a man or a woman, the ox shall be stoned, and his owner also shall be put to death. There's no intent here, but this is a negligence. He wasn't intending to kill somebody, but this is a negligence that is at the highest level.
It resulted in death.
Yeah, it can result. So a crime doesn't necessarily can't be a death penalty in God's law. In America, it has to be a crime to get the death penalty. If borrowed property is stolen, the borrower is negligent. So if a man deliver his goods to him, if it be stolen from him, he shall make restitution. So you're responsible if you borrow someone's property. It makes sense when you really think about it. If the owner is present with the borrowed property, you are not negligent. So if the owner comes with the property, but if the owner thereof be with it, he shall not make it good. So if I'm borrowing Chauncey's chainsaw or whatever, and he's with me, and the chain breaks or it gets bound up and it's damaged, I'm not responsible. Chauncey's the owner, he's there, he's still responsible. Okay, but if I borrowed it and he's not there, I'm solely responsible. If a man cause inadvertent injuries to another, he is negligent. Now, I'm going to talk about this one later because there's a lot of controversy about it. But if men strive and hurt a woman with child, he shall pay as the judges determine. Okay? But we're going to see there's more to it when we get to restitution. But if you cause inadvertent injuries, you're negligent. But we'll deal with that more in a minute. Unlawful money also takes away a property right. Money is to be of a standard fixed weight of precious metal, a perfect and a just weight. Money is to be of a standard fixed measurement, a perfect and a just measure. This is a bimetallic monetary system. Abram was very rich in cattle, in silver, and gold. Okay, it's a bimetallic monetary system. Gold is worth more than silver. It gives you a variety. The United States Constitution, we follow this. It says, no state shall make anything but gold and silver coin a tender in payment of debts. You see how I highlighted payment and debts? Payment of debts? That's a key term. The dollar is a silver coin of the United States of the value of 100 cents or a tenth part of an eagle. It weighs 412 and a half grains. Of 1,000 parts, 900 are pure silver and 100 of alloy. Basically, that is about 1 ounce of 90% pure silver. Do you see a just weight measure there? The 1 ounce is the weight, and the 90% is the measure. How much does a dollar bill weigh? Is our money's value based on something physical and tangible?
No.
That's the problem.
Money, it's currency.
It's not money, exactly. We're doing it wrong. But it's not our government doing it. The Federal Reserve notes. It's a bank note, that's obviously, but let's follow this trail here. A bank note is a promissory note issued by a bank or authorized banker payable to bearer on demand and intended to circulate as money. So what's a promissory note? It's a written promise to pay a certain sum of money at a future time. We haven't paid yet. We're paying at a future time, unconditionally.
With our lives.
Unconditionally. A promissory note differs from a mere acknowledgement of debt without any promise to pay, as when the debtor gives his creditor an IOU. It's an IOU.
Right.
Well, what's a promise? It's an engagement by which the promisor contracts. When you use a Federal Reserve note, you're signing a contract. You're engaging in a contract is what you're doing. Towards another to perform or do something to the advantage of the other, of the latter person. It's not to your advantage. Gives to the promisee a legal right to demand and enforce a fulfillment. So they have the right to demand and enforce a fulfillment. When we're handing these Federal Reserve notes out, are we paying for anything?
No.
Is the fulfillment done?
No, it's a third.
They've got a right to legally enforce that fulfillment. When they do it, I don't know. So let's look at payment. Payment is that which is given to execute what has been promised, or it is the fulfillment of a promise. But though this is the general acceptation of the word, yet by payment is understood every way by which the creditor is satisfied. So this satisfies the debt, or ought to be, and the debtor liberated, for example, and accord and satisfaction will operate as payment. So the creditor is satisfied, he's been paid, and we've been liberated from our obligation to pay. A discharge is to cancel or unloose the obligation of a contract, to make an agreement or contract null and inoperative. Discharge means you didn't pay, but you're released from the obligation for now. How the courts construe these two? Stanek v. White says there is a distinction between a debt discharged and one paid. When discharged, the debt still exists. I wonder why we have a national debt. Though divested of its character as a legal obligation during the operation of the discharge.
We have a very large discharge.
When you use gold and silver, you pay the debt and it's gone. When you use Federal Reserve notes, you discharge the debt and the debt still exists. We can never get rid of our national debt until we get rid of Federal Reserve notes. It just won't happen. You can try to refinance all you want, but as long as we keep discharging debts instead of paying them, our debt's never going to go away. Quick question off topic. If you're discharging debts, do you own do you own it?
No.
You don't own what you bought. You know who owns it? The issuer of the note. Here's a little story I heard once. Let's say it's like 100 years ago, because you'd never do this today. But I wanted to send Samantha to the store to pick something up, so I wrote her a note. Please give Samantha a dozen eggs. I will pay you. I owe you. She walks to the store, gives the guy the note, and he reads, okay, and he gives the eggs, and Samantha walks away. Now, the clerk has the note, Samantha has the eggs, and I'm at home, and she's walking. Who owns the eggs?
Clerk.
Samantha.
Well, the way the law reads is the issuer of the note. When you buy something with a Federal Reserve note, who owns what you bought?
The issuer.
The issuer of the note, the Federal Reserve. That's why there's always a debt. That's how notes work. So it's not money, it's an IOU. And whoever's name is on it is the owner. And clearly on it says Federal Reserve. We are the surety for that debt. Proverbs 17:18 says, a man void of understanding strikes hands and becomes surety in the presence of his friends. A man who doesn't understand shakes hands and makes an agreement and becomes the surety in the presence of his friends. Isn't that exactly what we did?
Yep.
We signed a contract by using the money, the Federal Reserve note, and now we signed a contract, and now we're the surety for our debt. So let's look at the dollar real quick. This is a Federal Reserve note. It says so right on the top. They don't hide it from us. Right here, it clearly says this note is legal tender for all debts, public and private. Does it say anything about gold? It doesn't say anything about gold. What it used to say was this. And you've probably seen this before. But it's redeemable in gold on demand at the United States Treasury, or in gold or lawful money at any Federal Reserve bank. We used to use paper money correctly. When it's backed by gold, it's okay. In my opinion. We probably should just use gold. It's not that hard to use a real coin. But the same problems with credit, the same problems with checks, the same problems with everything. God said a weight and a measure. And you don't weigh or measure paper. It just doesn't work that way. Yes?
Same thing with silver certificates.
Silver certificates were the
Backed
same
by
thing,
silver.
backed by silver.
Yeah.
And when we were doing that, I think that's as extreme as we could get and still be under God's law when it comes to money.
Right.
It's backed by what it should be, and we're just making it convenient by carrying paper around. That's as far as we should go. We went way too far. When we go into national captivity, which the scripture says we will, it will be perfectly legal and lawful because we signed up for it. That's the reality here, you guys. We're using their money. We signed up for it. We have nothing to complain about. We can't get mad at them. We're going to national captivity. That's where it's going to go unless we stop doing this. And I don't see any way around it until we start backing our money with gold. It's just the way it is. Yes?
They just said something about that when the government bailed out the savings and loans, and then this happened in Greece, and the investors in the bank bailed out the bank. He took their money because it was theirs, and they had a right to take it. So
the law clearly says it. When the Federal Reserve wants to call in what is owed to them, it's going to be the destruction of America. There's no way around it. It's happened to every nation so far. We're just a lot more advanced at it now because of our technology. We're doing it digitally to the extreme now. So, I've mentioned, you guys know I deal in gold and silver all the time. You can use gold and silver in business to this day. And it works, and it's to your advantage in a huge way.
Didn't Kennedy try to...
Yes.
That's why he put out $4 billion.
He tried to expose it. I don't think our rulers are the solution. Our rulers react to us. I think the people just need to stop using it. We don't have to use Federal Reserve notes.
People are clueless.
We don't have to. We could just start using gold and silver. In 1933, they got rid of gold. In 1964, they got rid of silver, I think. And then in the 70s, Ron Paul fought to get gold back, and he won in the Supreme Court. And as a result of his lawsuit, we started minting gold again in the 80s. Gold and silver is ready for us because he won that lawsuit. I'm a big fan of Ron Paul's for that very reason. And so now we have the choice. His lawsuit was all about, we don't have a choice to pay our debts at law anymore. That's what his whole thing was. And now, because of his lawsuit, they started minting gold and silver again, and we can use gold and silver. Now, there's a few catches to that. If your business is incorporated, you can't. So you have to avoid signing contracts with the government. You have to use their, what they say in that contract. But if you just do it privately, you can use gold and silver, and it's to your advantage. I've explained it to you guys in the past, but in 2 weeks, I'm going to show you exactly how to do that and all the laws that support you doing it, and why courts constantly rule that it's okay. And because it's clearly okay. Business practices. Unlawful business practices also take away rights. You shall not deal dishonestly or falsely with others when you buy or sell. Dealing falsely is to mislead, to deceive. This one's not very hard to get. This is basically fraud in business. We shouldn't do it personally, and we shouldn't do it in business. You shall not use unjust weights and measures. This is similar to what we just talked about, but in business, we're supposed to use a just weight and a just measure. Money is to be paid to the workman at the end of every day. Now, you can probably waive that. I get paid monthly. I don't think that's sin. If I choose to waive it in the contract, that's okay. But we should get our money every day. We did the work, we should get it. That's what God's law says. And the way I would construe it is it's on the worker. If they choose to waive it, I don't think there's any sin or any crime as long as they waived it. When you sell to your neighbor or buy from your neighbor, you shall not oppress one another. What is oppression? Oppress is yana, which means to rage or be violent, by implication to suppress or to maltreat. It's to tyrannize in modern law. One who having public authority uses it unlawfully to tyrannize over another, as if he keep him in prison until he shall do something which he is not lawfully bound to do. Okay, I would look at this not just as fraud, but more of extortion. Forcing someone into business practice, or in forcing someone to pay or buy something. It would be like organized crime today. You shall not demand as collateral a man's livelihood, so no man shall take the nether or the upper millstone to pledge. So the millstone, tools, sewing machine, a tractor, all these are what people earn their living with. That cannot be collateral or be given as a pledge. If this is my livelihood and I'm getting a loan and you take my livelihood away, how am I going to pay the loan back? You see what I'm saying? That's what this is saying. If you take my tractor, and I work with tractors for a living, how am I going to pay the loan back if I have no tractor to make money to pay it back? That's what this is saying. So we're not to use these as collateral, because your livelihood is the only way to pay the debt back.
He's saying, how do you buy it?
Yeah.
Because you need to get a loan to buy it.
Well, I personally believe we're better off saving up until we have the money to buy.
Amen.
That's just the way we should do it. We used to do it. It wasn't a foreign concept to us until recently. But the next one says the creditor must not forcibly take his collateral. Okay, so it's not my job to go forcibly take it back. They're supposed to willingly give it. And the reason why, I think, is God said, avenge not yourselves, vengeance is His. If someone's going to defraud me, okay, I'm just going to let God take care of it. It doesn't need to come to violence. And it's not worth violence. Who wants to get hurt over it? But we shouldn't be doing business deals that are going to, make or break us. It should be something that if I lost this, I should be okay without it still. But God wants us to let Him be our vengeance. And He has a legal system to use, and the ultimate authority is Him. He will take care of it if He needs to. That's the way I would construe this. You shall not delay a poor man his pledge. So if he's poor, you've got to return it before the sun goes down, is what it says. In any case, thou shalt deliver him the pledge again when the sun goes down. So he has a right to it. You need to return it. That was talking about his raiment, his clothing, not something from his livelihood. He has the right to sleep in his own whatever he has. If he's poor, which means he doesn't have much, but just, the example given, I think, was he may sleep in his own raiment. Now, his clothing isn't what he's making a living with. But the man needs to be comfortable. If that's all he's got, that's all he's got. You take the collateral that's lawful. It's not his livelihood. But you give it back if necessary. But you have the property right. It's not your property. It's not an item. But you have the right to it. But because he's poor, you let him keep it. Just for his comfort. But you still have the right for it. It really makes sense when you think about it. We should treat people who are in need that way. It is. It makes sense. You shall not demand collateral from a widow. Again, that should just make sense. They're not going to have much of a means to pay it back. Or they're going to have need. And you are to keep all contracts, oaths, and vows. And that leads us into the next one, which is contracts, oaths, and vows. So unlawful contracts also take away property rights. Do you see why I keep putting that up on each slide? Property rights is very important in God's law. Contracts are an agreement upon sufficient consideration to do or not to do a particular thing. You probably knew that. There's always an offer, which is a proposed thing. An acceptance, which is an agreement to receive something which has been offered. There's a time limit, which is the duration of the contract. And consideration, which is a compensation which is paid. Bovier's and Black's Law Dictionary list these 4 things out for you. There are many types. A unilateral contract is a vow or a promise. Those are the words the Scripture uses. It's an engagement by which the promise or contracts towards another to perform or do something to the advantage of the latter. One person's making a contract, they have to do it. That's what a vow or a promise is. A bilateral contract is a contract in which both the contracting parties are bound to fulfill obligations reciprocally towards each other. And then an oath is a declaration made according to law before a competent tribunal or officer to tell the truth. Okay, these are what the Scripture's talking. They're just using different words. That's exactly there. It's a unilateral contract is the modern term. So, and in Abrahamic covenant, it uses the word promise. For a reason, because it's promise. This is again why I love the King James. It uses Old English and it matches law books so well. Some of our modern translations just don't. So if you want an extra definition that fits English really well, Black's Law, William Blackstone, Bouvier, they studied the Scripture and they got it pretty close to right. It's still a man's interpretation, but it's way better than the religious commentaries we have out there. They hit it right. They hit the nail right on the head almost every time. Contracts and treaties with pagan nations are forbidden. I went over that with foreign nations. This is a duplicate statute. But it says, take heed to thyself, lest thou make a covenant with the inhabitants of the land whither you go, lest it be for a snare in the midst of thee. How is it a snare? Well, the president shall have power to make treaties. So our president can make treaties. But what do treaties do? Treaties become our law. This Constitution and the laws of the United States which shall be made in pursuance thereof, and all treaties made, shall be the supreme law of the land. This is what opened the door for us to add to and take away from God's law. And that's what we've been doing ever since. Treaties is one of the biggest ways we add to God's law. Because we know in one aspect it works this way. No one's going to approve this law because we're not going to get enough votes for it. But if we sign a treaty with another nation, it'll automatically be approved. So that's how they can subvert us. And there's thousands of treaties we have out there. But to subvert us and our influence over our own law, because we're that sovereign citizen, which doesn't make any sense if you think about it. They subvert our decision making in this by making treaties. Yeah, a sovereign citizen. A citizen is subject to a sovereign. How can you be a sovereign citizen?
Yeah.
It makes no sense. Which is one of the biggest tax protestation arguments out there, and it fails in court every time. It kind of makes you laugh when you see what the term is. But that's what they're using. Sovereign citizen is an oxymoron. It doesn't make any sense. Oaths are to be taken in God's name. So we're to swear by His name. We used to do that. We'd swear on the Bible. And it was God's law. The common law is in our court system. You shall keep the oath that you make without delay. Why is this important to God? Well, God keeps covenant for 1,000 generations. You see this throughout the Scripture. God loves to keep His word. Keeping His word is important, and He loves it when we keep our word. So if you make an agreement and you're going to do something, it is I can't emphasize how important the Bible makes it that we keep our word. You shall make no false contract, and ye shall not swear by my name falsely, neither shall you profane the name of the Lord. It's going to profane the Lord if you make a false contract in His name. You may not bring the hire of a prostitute or a sodomite to make a vow. It doesn't really say that, but it says, thou shalt not bring the hire of a whore or the price of a dog. But the price of a dog, that's what it means. It figuratively represents a sodomite comparable to a dog. That's what John Gill said. And if you just look at the context, the verse before says, there shall be no whore of the daughters of Israel, nor a sodomite of the son of Israel. And then he goes on using that phrase. What he's saying is you cannot use money earned from prostitution as a male or a female in any vow with God's name. And I don't think any of us have that issue, so it's probably kind of irrelevant to this group. But that's an obvious law for an obvious reason. You are clear from the oath when you fully perform it. If you refrain from vowing, there is no sin. But if thou shalt forbear to vow, it shall be no sin in thee. That's what the Messiah meant when He said, swear not at all. But let your communication be yes, yes, or no, no. For whatsoever is more than these comes from evil. This is referring to your reputation. Remember that slander thing? That's important to God. Reputation is a person's credit, honor, character, or good name. Injuries to one's reputation, which is a personal right, are defamatory and malicious words, libels, and malicious indictments or prosecutions. We should be able to simply give our word, and that should be enough. Is that not how America was founded?
A handshake.
200, just a handshake, and everybody knew that guy's going to keep his word. If he didn't do it twice, everybody knew that guy doesn't keep his word, and you don't do contracts with him anymore. Yeah. When our reputations cannot be trusted, you now need written contracts. Where are we at in America today? Does anybody want to do a contract for a lot of money without a written document? No. I don't trust people. I trust you guys, but I wouldn't trust most people. I want a written document. One thing to remember, all contracts are verbal. The written document is only the highest and best evidence of the contract. So all contracts are verbal. That's what the Scripture says. Whatever comes forth out of your mouth, that you've got to keep it. That's not a direct quote, obviously, but the contract is verbal. The written document is the best evidence you're going to bring in court. We're writing contracts because we don't trust each other because we're not people of our word anymore. 200 years ago, people would die before they broke their contract. Before they broke their word. They just would not allow that to happen. The rest of contract law revolves around marriage. And this might be offensive. I hope it's not to this group. But Sir William Blackstone said this about marriage. By marriage, the husband and wife are one person in law. That is, the very being or legal existence of the woman is suspended during the marriage, or at least is incorporated and consolidated into that of the husband, under whose wing, protection, and cover she performs everything. So the husband is the protector and cover over the woman and over the family. A man cannot grant anything to his wife or enter into covenant with her, for the grant would be to suppose her separate existence, and to covenant with her would be only to covenant with himself. That's how serious they took this stuff. That's what the Bible means. This is scriptural. This is exactly what the Bible means when it says the two shall become one. Rochelle took my last name. We're the same person. When she does everything, it's under my authority and under my cover, under my protection. Here's what the statutes say. Fathers can cancel vows for their daughters if they live in his house. So being in her father's house in her youth, a father can disallow her in the day that he hears it, not any of her vows or her bonds wherewith she has bound, her soul shall stand. So once the father hears it, he can undo it. Now, when society knows this, it's not a problem, because everybody would know, well, you're a young woman, your dad has to approve this anyways. We can make an agreement, but we'll wait until your father agrees, makes the agreement.
It's when you have to ask the father for her hand.
Yeah, it fits in all contracts. A father cannot cancel a daughter's oath if he was aware of it. So, and her father hear her vow, and her bond wherewith she has bound her soul, and her father shall hold his peace. This is the doctrine of latches today. You have to act immediately. You have to do something right away. You can't hold your peace and then later say, this isn't working right, I want out. It just doesn't work that way. But the father's the one that's going to make the determination either way. Husbands can cancel vows made by a wife. This is one people don't like, but if her husband disallow her on that day that he heard it, then he shall make her vow which she vowed of none effect. So a husband is the final authority. This is what the New Testament's talking about when the father's the head of the house. It's not some spiritual thing we like to talk about in church today, but this is exactly what he's talking about. The head of woman is man, and the head of man is Christ. I mean, it works up just like that. That's the way the Bible describes it. It's not something we should get offended at. Women have a higher status. They run the home. It's so much better God's way, but we want to be offended at everything God says just for certain reasons. I don't know why. Husbands cannot cancel vows made by a wife if he was aware of it, and her husband heard it and held his peace, then all her vows shall stand. So the final authority in the home and all contracts are with the husband. A vow from a widow or divorced woman shall stand against her. Now, for obvious reasons, she doesn't have a man in her life. She is the head of her household. Okay? Now, we don't like this today for some reason, but this is all a protection for the family. That's what it is. And God has just ordained two different roles, and that's all it is. Too many times we look at it as equal, not equal, and that's not what it is. It's just different roles. I'll be honest, with all of our private businesses, Rochelle runs it all. She does all the work. She deserves all the credit, but she always does just run things by me to make sure. I'm just the one that takes the blame if something goes wrong, is the reality of it.
The fall guy.
That's exactly what we are. It's a protection device. Women have a higher status than men do under Hebrew law. Women cannot be compelled to go to war. They cannot be compelled to pay their debts. I can. If Rochelle makes a debt and I'm the one responsible for it, not her. They can't be compelled to work. There's a lot of status differences, and women have a higher status in America. There was a lady named Phyllis Schlafly, and I need to put this quote in one of these presentations, but during the women's lib movement, she was a big CEO, very successful woman, and she was against the women's lib, and they finally interviewed her and said, why do you not want equal rights? Everybody wants equal rights, and her reaction was simple, and it was so profound. She said, why would I want equal rights when I already have superior rights? She knew what was happening. It was lowering women down to men, not raising women up to men. That's exactly what Women's Lib did.
Yeah.
That's all. Our rights are being dropped, not raised. No one goes up. It's always bringing them down. So the man of the house approves or disapproves of all contracts made under his household. That's the way God's law works. Inheritance. Unlawful inheritance practices take away property rights. Do you know God wants us to give our kids an inheritance?
No.
He does. It's actually kind of big, and we've squandered most of it away in America. God's very into inheritance, and we've squandered it here in America. Some definitions. Inherit means something inherited, generally an estate, patrimony, or portion. It's an estate or property which a man has by descent as heir to another, or which may be transmitted to another as his heir. We probably already know what these mean, but your firstborn son is to receive the father's birthright. That's the greater portion. A portion is referring to inheritance. It's the mouth, specifically edge, portion, or side, but this refers specifically to the mouth, but occasionally to inheritance. Portion in modern law is the share falling to a child from a parent's estate, or the estate of anyone bearing a similar relation. See how the English dictionary, and when you go to law dictionary, gets it right almost every time, if you're using an older translation. The household is given to the firstborn. That's what this means. In 2 Chronicles 21:3 it says, "And their father gave them great gifts of silver and gold and of precious things, with fenced cities in Judah. But the kingdom gave he to Jehoram because he was the firstborn." The firstborn continues the family. So in my family, well, I only have one son, but Jonathan will get my household and continue the family business. And continue that. Any other sons I had would go start their own businesses somewhere else. Daughters would go join another family and do the same thing. So as the head of the house, I'm looking to get them set up. So this great gifts, I should be saving up. Let's say I had 10 kids. I should be saving up for every child, every male who's not a firstborn, to give them a gift to go get started in life. And that firstborn is going to take over what I had started and continue the family and take care of me in my old age. Okay, and the daughters, I would find the best maid I can and set them up.
The other aspect of that is if the father dies, it goes to the son, and the son is responsible to take care of the mother.
Absolutely.
So that's the other part of that responsibility in what he inherits. It is to take care of the underage daughters or sisters of that son and the mother.
Yeah.
Because they all come now under his lead.
This is God's Social Security program. And Social Security is a ripoff to us, and we shouldn't be doing it. We should let the families take care of it. And that's what we've lost sight of with inheritance. Daughters can receive the birthright if there is no son. This was adjudicated in the temple. All right, then ye shall cause his inheritance to pass unto his daughter. I mentioned this a couple of weeks ago. The daughters of Zelophehad went to Moses and Eleazar the priest at the congregation. They said, "Our father died in the wilderness. He was not in the company of Korah." They said, "Give us therefore a possession among the brethren of our father." And Moses brought their cause, their judgment, to the Lord in the tabernacle. And God ruled in their favor. He said, "The daughters of Zelophehad speak right. You deserve the inheritance." And that's where our inheritance laws came from. If a man has no children, his inheritance is to be given to his next of kin. That's what this determined right here. That judgment, one of the earliest ones in the temple, determined that if he have no son, then it goes to his daughters. If he have no daughters, it goes to his brethren, then to his father's brethren, then to his next of kin. That whole next of kin comes from a judgment. It's not in God's law, it's in a judgment that the temple construed. If a man has two wives, the firstborn of the two wives receives the birthright. This is why people get mad at me when I say polygamy is okay in the scripture. It's a social status. There's a reason for it. God would not have made a law for how to do it if it were against the scripture. Now, it's not for everybody. It's something that's rare. It's something that is a social status. It's something for the wealthy, for the rulers to be doing. Because there's an old thinking that my daughter's only going, if I'm royalty, they're only going to marry royalty. What if there's only one? You don't have a lot of options when you're at that level and you're trying to find the best suitor for your daughter. You don't go down in status. Your job as a father is to set your kids up for success. And that sounds harsh in today's reality, but that's just the truth. We're trying to improve our status here. But anyways, if a man has 2 wives, the firstborn of the 2 wives receives the birthright. It goes through saying it doesn't matter whether you have the firstborn's wife is one you don't like versus the other one you really like. The firstborn gets the birthright. The only exception to that in the scripture is when the child did something evil, but not when the wives or the moms did something evil. I should have put that verse in there.
Such as Reuben?
Yes. There's a couple of lost birthrights in the scripture, and it was based on the child. It wasn't based on the mom. The duty of the husband's brother is an inheritance statute. That's when a man dies having no children, the wife is to marry his brother and have a son to inherit for him. Okay?
That's rough.
It is a difficult one in our society to accept, but if brother A is married and dies and has no children, that wife would marry brother B and create a family line for him, which was endorsing more than one wife again. So it's hard for us to accept today because our minds don't think like that anymore. But it is a commandment. They're supposed to.
It was a requirement.
Onan didn't do it, and he was punished for it.
Right.
But our minds aren't trained to think like this. Polygamy is actually legal in America
Yeah.
if you don't have a marriage license.
Yep.
If you have a marriage license, you can't have 2 wives. You can do it in America, just don't get a marriage license with either of the 2 wives, and it's perfectly okay. Charity. Not being charitable takes away property rights. Remember, the Levite, stranger, fatherless, and poor all have property rights. If you don't allow gleaning, leaving the corners of your fields, or lending when in need, this steals their property. I don't know if we think of it that way. But when we're commanded to give and we don't give, we're stealing from somebody because it's their property right. Property's not the thing. You shall not oppress widows and orphans. That's kind of a duplicate, but we're not allowed to afflict widows and orphans. If you oppress a widow or orphan and they pray to God, the wrath of God will kill you. This is how serious God takes it. That's what it says. If they cry out at me at all, I will surely hear their cry, and my wrath shall wax hot, and I will kill you. I think God will still do that today. I really do. If there's a widow being oppressed by someone, I'll just use me as an example, and she decides to go to God about it, God's going to find a way to get me. Unless I'm repentant, maybe He won't. You can always repent and go make it right. There's always that. But I think if you're stubborn and rebellious about it, I think God's going to do it. And I think He probably has, and we just don't recognize it. It's God doing it.
I like the way God worded it, where He said, if you oppress the widow and the orphan, I'll make your wife a widow. And your
Exactly what He had. The last sentence I didn't read. God's very poetic in His justice.
Yes.
The perjury one, you're going to get what you thought to do unto him, it's poetic justice.
And I think that's the key word, I think, when it comes to God, is justice.
Yeah. Well, the common law is called a justice system.
Yes.
The Roman civil law is called an adversarial system. 2 different systems.
You can't tell who's in charge of which
Yes.
one, right?
Leave the corner of your fields and all gleanings for the poor and stranger. You're probably familiar with that. Gleaning is to gather what is left by reapers. You're not to wholly reap the corners of your field, neither shall you gather the gleanings of your harvest. You leave them for the poor. You shall not oppress the poor. For the same reason as widows, oppress means to press upon, defraud, violate. You shouldn't take advantage of them because they don't have much money. I'm going to lend to you, but usury is one of those ways to take advantage of them. We'll get to that in a minute. The poor may eat of their neighbor's crops, but may not take any away. So if you're poor, you can go to your neighbor's fields and you can eat, but you just can't reap. You can't harvest. You must lend to the poor. I don't know if we realize that, but if you have the means, you're required to lend to the poor. If there be among you a poor man, one of thy brethren within any of thy gates, in thy land which the Lord thy God gives you, thou shalt not harden thine heart, nor shut thine hand from thy poor brother, but thou shalt open thine hand wide unto him, and shalt surely lend him sufficient for his need. That's a commandment. Obviously, if you don't have enough, you can't. But if you have enough to loan to someone when they're in need, you're required to do it.
It said brethren there, and who would be the brethren for us?
I look at it in America, it's American.
Really?
That's exactly the way I look at it. Now,
Any American?
Yeah.
well, I don't just think if they're believers, I don't regulate how strong their faith is. If you do the numbers, a large majority of Americans are still calling themselves believers or Christians. But if there's a brother who is in America in need, absolutely. If they're a stranger, a foreigner, these are the words the Scripture uses. They don't use churchianity words.
Yeah.
They're really using national words. So I'm looking at this as a nation. This is very patriotic. You know, America's a godly nation. And, well, it used to be, and we've gone astray. But we're Americans, and we should support each other and help each other. You guys are my brothers and sisters as believers, but also nationally. The Scripture also says if a man doesn't work, he doesn't eat. And we're going to get to God's... some more of the laws will actually answer this question if we keep moving.
I always felt bad about that.
No, I wouldn't feel bad about it. If there's a young man who's physically able in America, I usually don't give him anything. You can go stand at Home Depot and get some money.
That's where
That's what you can do. Someone will give you money for something. You don't need to get a handout. If it's a woman with children, it may be different, but even you never know. So you got to be cautious. You cannot withhold lending to brethren because the land Sabbath is soon. The land Sabbath relinquishes the obligation of the debt. It's over. So if the land Sabbath is soon, you don't say, I'm not going to loan to you now because 6 months you don't have to pay it back. You take that into consideration, you still loan it. Why? Even in the New Testament, the Messiah said, lend expecting nothing in return. We're supposed to have that attitude when we're helping a poor brothers. This is someone in need. There's not that many poor in America. There's people in the world that are living on $2 a day. You know, when someone's living on, $100 a day, and they feel like, oh my goodness. Yeah. The third tithe is for the Levite, stranger, fatherless, and widows. This is where charity comes from. It's the third tithe. So let's talk about the third tithe, and I think some of these questions will... Not keeping a third tithe takes away property rights. But remember, the third tithe is for welfare. This could be construed as paying taxes that support welfare. Now, our welfare system it's horrible. It's not even close to what God, so it's hard to rationalize that. But the reality is we're forced to spend it, and there's no way around it. Biblical tithing is always on the increase. The closest way to look at that with Federal Reserves, it's always on the net, not the gross. It's based on what you make. Okay? So you're taxed not on the 100 sheep you have, but how many kids did they have? That's how it works. It's on the increase. It's not very clear because we're using the wrong system anyways. It's hard to match them up. It really is. If we were using gold and silver, we wouldn't even be getting the income tax. We would just make the $100,000 and just pay the tithe off that. But we're getting the income tax as a secondary thing. The first tithe is for Levites. It's to run the government. We call it an income tax. It's corrupted. It's not quite right. The second tithe is for holy days. This is a savings account to be spent on holy days. It's vacation time. It says right there, at the place where the Lord chooses to put His name. That's the holy days. That's where we go. So it's a savings account. We get to spend it on whatever we want to, whatever your soul lusts after. And the third tithe is for the poor and needy. That's what we're going to go through. There's four statutes. The third tithe shall take place every third year. At the end of 3 years, thou shalt bring forth all the tithe. So here's a Sabbath year right here. The first 2 years, you have a first and a second tithe. The third year, you also have a third tithe. The fourth and fifth, you only have a first and second. The third year, you have a third tithe. And the seventh, you only have a first and a second. Remember, the second one is your savings account.
Right.
It's for you.
For feast days.
Yeah, it's for you.
Yeah.
It's for vacation time.
First one is your income tax.
Yes, exactly. You're already doing it with your income tax. I personally don't believe in adding to it another 10%.
Right.
The first tithe does not go to the church.
Oh.
My opinion of the church, if you look in almost every secular definition of ecclesia, is it's the judicial system.
Oh.
So your first tithe goes to the judicial system. Our problem is we not only have a judicial system, we have a king and a Congress we got to pay for also. So now we have 30-something% or whatever it is for your tax bracket. So we're only supposed to have a judicial system and 10% pays for that fine.
So we don't have, okay, all right.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
The third tithe is for the Levite, strangers, orphans, and widows. So that's who the needy predominantly are.
Can you decide who the needy is, though? If you see somebody who needs help, that's
the way I do it today.
Okay, all right.
shall receive a blessing from the Lord for faithfully following the third tithe, and you shall receive a curse for not faithfully following the third tithe. Okay, here's how it looks. This is the American welfare program. This is why American welfare is not working. We have gone way beyond the scope of scriptural charity.
Before 1917, we didn't have welfare. We had charitable organizations.
Look at all that.
Care of people in charity. It didn't give them enough to actually take care of themselves, maybe 80%. So they still had to go out and do some work by chopping wood, shoveling coal, and then when they did sewing.
Well, that's closer to what God intended.
Yeah. 1917 is when charity, the welfare system.
I know this gets annoying, but it's proving a point, I think, and that's the whole purpose to it, is to show how far beyond God's system we've gone. This encourages living off the government. It's so easy to get. God's program will teach personal responsibility. Here's how it works. You can get on the first year, you can glean, which requires work. You can eat the corners of your neighbor's crops, which requires work. And you can pick what you can eat from others, as long as you don't harvest it. You can eat your daily fill, which requires work. The second year, the same thing happens. You're working that year. The third year, you can work, but you can also get the third tithe. Now, all of a sudden, you've been working, and now you get a handout to try and pick yourself up and make yourself better. The next year, you got to work again for it. You're not getting a handout. The next year, you got to work again for it. Then finally, the sixth year, you can get that handout again. And the seventh year, all your debt is forgiven. Do you see what this teaches? You're working and working. You finally get a handout. Are you going to squander that, or are you going to try and make yourself better so you don't have to go pick cranes in the field and try and... This encourages personal responsibility is what it does. This whole system encourages you, because you can only get this third tithe 2 years out of 7, and they're spread out. So you got to work and work. All that's going to be doing is teaching you, man, I'm getting tired of this. I want to get a better life. I'm sick of this work. Oh, my neighbor's giving me $5,000 to start a business. Thank you. That is so awesome. What are you going to do?
Big screen TV.
Exactly, probably. In America, that's what we do. I literally have neighbors who they try to arrange things to live off the government. I have a niece that does that. Everything is about living off the government because it's that easy. Our system is not at all the way God designed it.
So were the people supposed to every 3 years bring this 10% to the Levites? And then the widows and the orphans would
come and get it from there. What I personally do, and you can construe this as we're paying our welfare program as it is, and that's your third tithe. But it's really neat to just put it aside if you can. And when you have a neighbor to find a way to get it to them and try and bless them when you can. I don't know when the Sabbath year is. There's a lot of theories. So I don't know which year to pick. So Rochelle and I put 3 1/3 aside every year. And when something comes up, from people we personally know, that's what we do. But that's just one way. We really can't do this until our government's on board.
Right.
That's the reality. But this is what God said to do. And now you can see why we're reaping consequences. Our welfare scams are exactly a result of not keeping the third tithe. That's exactly where it goes. And we should have avoided that.
You're saying we
They
can't
make great
follow?
money off them.
We couldn't follow this easily. Well, we'd be paying double. You see, because we're already paying part of our check to welfare. If we did it on our own,
Yeah, do it again.
we're doing it again.
But God says that He's going to punish us if we don't.
He is punishing America because we don't. Because all of our welfare money is going to someone sitting on the couch playing video games and living off the government. And that's our punishment. He's wasting our money for us.
And they penalize them if they go to work.
Exactly. I've got a friend that he makes more money on workers' compensation than he does going to work, and he's fine. He's not that injured. I mean, he wants to live off the government, and I can see why. It's very relaxing. Okay, usury. There's two statutes for usury. Usury takes away a property right. Usury is neshek, which means interest on a debt or usury. It comes from neshak. It means to strike with a sting, bite, or lend upon usury. Strike with a sting or bite. Usury in Old English law means interest of money, increase for the loan of money, a reward for the use of money. In modern law, it's unlawful interest, which means beyond the rate of interest established by law. We've changed it recently. It used to mean no interest. Now it means as long as it's not over a certain amount of interest established by law. If you lend to any of your brethren who is poor, you are not to take or lay usury upon them. So we cannot lend to our brethren with usury or interest. You may charge usury to a foreigner. That's stranger. Which stranger is it? Okay, it's nokri, which is strange, foreign, non-relative, adulterous. It comes from nakar, which means heathendom. This is a stranger who is not a brother. This is a visitor from a foreign land. They are not a believer. They are not an Israelite. They are not brethren. Brethren are ger, that is a guest, a sojourner, one who is, they're not Israelite born. They're not an Israelite by blood, but they've grafted in. They are Israelite now, even though they're not by blood. This is a brother who is not Israelite born. So this is referring to, you can lend to someone that bites or stings and charge them interest to a heathen, someone from a pagan nation who doesn't follow God's law. But you can't do it to a brother. Here's what I think usury means, a quick summary, because there's a lot regarding this, but we are commanded to lend to our brethren in need. Absolutely. Okay, even at the risk of losing the money. That's what the scripture says. Don't wait till don't count the 7th year and not lend to someone. The Messiah even endorsed this when he said, lend hoping for nothing in return or nothing again. However, we cannot lend to our brethren in need with interest that bites or harms them. We can lend to a stranger who is not a believer with interest that bites or harms them. This is a heathen stranger, not an Israelite stranger. So we can charge interest to other nations, to foreigners who aren't American. The difference here is charitable loans cannot have interest. It's for charity. You're not trying to make money on this loan. You can't loan to your poor brother and try and make money on them.
What if he has a business and he needs a loan?
Business loans can have interest. It is an investment. The scripture says nothing about business loans. It's charitable loans. Business loans. Now, we would be wise to think it through. Debt and interest is okay. But we should always be careful. Well, has American been careful with our debt? No. We're doing foolish things with our debt. The scripture does say as a doctrine, owe no man anything. So I don't think you're wrong to get a loan. I used to think this. But I don't think we're wrong to get a loan for business purposes. But we should be very wise about it. And we should be very cautious about that interest if it does have interest. But if you're doing a charitable loan, trying to make money off someone who's poor, is just wrong. And we shouldn't do that. If you're giving to someone for charity, just count it as a loss. If they can pay it back, great. That's the way the scripture wants us to look at it. So if you can't afford to give it for charity, don't give it. If you can, God expects us to. I personally just make sure I know the person. I drive right by people on the freeway because most of them are middle-aged guys my age. It's like, you can go work.
Yeah.
And the scripture is very clear, if a man doesn't work, you don't eat. But if there's someone that I'm really sensing has a legitimate need, and I have the extra cash or the extra money, I would do what I can to take care of them. But I don't want them to go buy alcohol or something like that. We got to use our brain. The bottom of the line is God expects us to give when we can, but we should use our brains. We should make sure that it's really a need. Those with disabilities have a property right also. You shall not curse the deaf or put a stumbling block before the blind. This should be obvious. I don't think we have that issue here in this room. But it is growing more and more in America. Question. Does this refer to the deaf and blind only, or does it refer to all disabilities?
Yes.
That's what the spirit of the law is for. We are not to cause any harm to someone with any disability, not just deaf and blind. Sometimes you get in that letter, oh, well, you're not deaf and you're not blind, but you're missing 2 limbs, and come on, we need to use it. You shall show respect for the elderly. Okay, we've lost that in America today too. We should show kids, just from a teacher's perspective, don't respect people older than them.
That's right.
Restitution is the remedy for theft. This is the remedy. There's 22 statutes, but we'll go quickly through them. Restitution and punishment should be according to the crime. Breach for breach, eye for eye, tooth for tooth. That's God's law. What you did to them, that's what gets done to you. This is the underlying principle for all restitution. Assault and battery must be repaid in full. Health care, loss of wages, etc. He shall pay for the loss of his time and shall cause him to be thoroughly healed. Whatever it takes to make him thoroughly healed is what they pay.
That would be nice.
There's no limits. We have limits today. Disciplining a servant is okay. If death occurs, he shall be punished. That sounds harsh, but God's law is pretty harsh. This is a bond servant. One who is a servant due to a debt they can't pay, which is why it says he is his money. So the assumption I would have here is he's disciplining him because he's not working to pay off his debt like he should be. So God's a big, well, we can't in America, but God's a big fan of corporal punishment. Obviously, though, if death occurs, then he's going to be punished. You don't have the right to take his life, but you do have the right, if he owes you a debt and he's your servant, to do what's necessary to get him to pay that debt. But don't do this in America, because America does not allow that. For one, no one's going to become your bondservant. If you are reckless and cause an injury, you owe full restitution. This is that one I referred to earlier. If you are reckless and cause no injury, you owe a fine. This is this controversial verse that people have heard, but if men strive and hurt a woman with child so that her fruit depart from her, and yet no mischief follow, he shall be surely punished according as the woman's husband will lay upon him, and he shall pay as the judges determine. That sounds like an abortion, and it's just a fine. Is that what it is?
No.
And if any mischief follow, then thou shalt give life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burning for burning, wound for wound, and stripe for stripe. Some definitions to help understand this. Mischief is asan, which means hurt or mischief. According to Brown Driver Briggs, it's evil, mischief, harm, or hurt. I wanted to throw a third one in there. The Complete Word Study Dictionary, it's a masculine noun meaning evil, mischief, harm, hurt, or damage. It signifies bodily harm or personal loss. The mischief today doesn't mean what it used to mean. Okay? In a legal dictionary, in the phrase malicious mischief, it imports a wanton or reckless injury to persons or property. So this is someone who was reckless and caused an injury. So let's read this again. When you cause an injury due to recklessness, you owe life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth. When you are reckless but no injury is caused, you owe a fine. So if you change mischief to injury, which is what it should be, injury due to recklessness, the woman either had the injury or she didn't. But she was hit and you get a fine for it. But if it caused a damage to the child or the woman, you pay full restitution. If someone dies, you die. If there's a life for life, wound for wound, stripe for stripe, whatever happens to them happens to you. So that's what I meant by this statute. It's kind of misunderstood. Mischief, if we went by the law books, it makes sense. King James nailed it on that one. But we don't use mischief today that way. So it gets a little misconstrued. If an animal kills a person, the animal is to be put to death. That one's pretty clear. If an animal injures a servant, the owner pays the servant's master. The animal is killed. So if you're a servant, you don't have the right. You've lost your rights.
Right.
If one man's animal kills another man's animal, then the live animal is to be sold and the money equally divided between them. That just makes sense. No one's at fault there, so you split it. Theft, it's double if property is returned. So if I steal your car, get caught, if I can return the car, I have to pay you 2 cars. Felony theft is 5 times restored. But that's if you can't return it. Okay, but that's for an ox, and for a sheep would be a misdemeanor theft. It's 4 times restored. But that's if you can't return it. So you've lost the item. So I stole your car, but I can't return the exact item that I stole. I owe you 4 or 5 times the amount. Think about how this would fix theft in America.
Yep.
Can you imagine? We don't do that to criminals today. You steal a car, you owe 5 of them? I mean, come on. That would solve a lot of theft problems. The nighttime killing of a thief is permitted. There shall be no blood shed for him if you kill a thief. The daytime killing of a thief is forbidden. I'm going to answer that. Why? Oh, were you just reading that? Oh, okay. Because restitution is what theft is. The penalty for theft is restitution, not death. But what would the spirit of the law say? At night, you might feel threatened. You can't see. This is not like out here in downtown city with city lights everywhere. Yeah. This is out in where there's no lights. It's scary. You might feel threatened. The spirit of the law, if it is daytime and he has a gun, are you threatened?
Yes.
Yeah, and we kind of construe the law that way. You basically just have to say you felt threatened and you're okay. You're afraid for your life. That was the word I was looking for. And that's how the spirit of the law works. It's not just that it's nighttime. The context makes sense for them at nighttime. Here at nighttime, shoot, you can have full lights on and see as it's day in your house. And that really wouldn't qualify if you just shoot him just because he's in your house, but he's not armed or something. Maybe it'd go the other way. If you cannot pay the sum you owe, you will become their slave, and we're going to talk about that later. Damages due to acts of negligence shall be repaid. Examples of negligence in the scripture: not covering a pit, burning down a field, not putting a rail on your roof. All these basically mean, the spirit of the law, any act of negligence has the same punishment. You can be driving and eating. You're negligent if you cause a damage. Now, in America, under the Roman civil law, if the cop sees you doing it, you might get a ticket. It's the difference between regulation and property rights. You didn't take away anybody's property right by eating or texting or doing whatever behind the wheel, but you broke a regulation. That's where we're at today in America. If borrowed property is stolen or damaged without the borrower's knowledge, an oath between the owner, borrower, and the Lord is to be made. The borrower shall not make restitution. So if there's borrowed property, then an oath is made saying, hey, I don't know anything about it. I didn't damage it. I didn't take it. I didn't steal it. It says no man seeing it, then he doesn't have restitution to be made. If borrowed property is stolen from him, he shall make full restitution. This is with knowledge. In other words, he should have taken greater precautions. If borrowed property is destroyed due to an act of God, the property is used as evidence and no restitution is to be made. So if an animal's torn in pieces or whatever it might be, then no restitution is to be made. It was an act of God. If borrowed property is damaged or destroyed in the absence of the owner, he shall make full restitution. So if the owner's not there, then you're the one responsible for it. But if the owner is there, if the borrowed property is damaged or destroyed in the presence of the owner, then the owner's the one that's completely responsible at that time. It's his property. He's transferring the property right to you for a time during the loan, and you're solely responsible. But if he's there, he's the highest holder of that property right. And finally, negligent homicide is punished by stoning. We kind of alluded to this earlier. If you knew that the ox was dangerous and you didn't do anything about it, you can be put to death even for negligence. And negligent homicide may be redeemed by a sum of money. That's something that we don't really think about today. But you're guilty, you can go to the other party and say, hey, you know what, I've got a lot of money. I can pay you $1 million if you let me off the hook. And that's okay for negligent homicide. Nothing in the scripture makes me think it's okay for murder, for criminal intent. It might be, but I can't think of anything that would make you think it's okay. Slaves. Slavery is a social status. A slave has waived his rights voluntarily or involuntarily. There are 3 forms: slaves, bondservants, and hired servants. Man stealing, whether selling or in possession of, is a capital felony. We cannot steal another man's right to be free. Slaves are to come from foreign nations. So slaves can come from foreign nations. But they're to come from conquered nations. So their slaves from foreign nations become slaves because we went to war with them. Slaves can be inherited by your children. So it's forever. Slaves of foreign nations can serve forever. I just said that. You shall not extradite a slave who has fled to your land. This is a slave of a foreign nation. We are to accept refugees from other nations. That sounds pretty bad, especially given what we're going through here in America. But remember, this must fit all foreign policy laws. God's law does not contradict. Remember when we talked about foreign policies? Foreigners must assimilate. So the assumption is this slave is escaping from a foreign nation and wants to come in and assimilate to Israel. Or America, wherever it is. There were 3 foreigners, remember? Nakar, Zur, and Ger. This has to be a Ger, a guest. Because it would be against God's foreign policy laws if it wasn't. This escaped slave must be a Ger and desire to serve Yahweh. So you were not to deliver him back. He shall dwell with you, even among you, in that place which he shall choose in one of thy gates, where it liketh him best. Thou shalt not oppress him. So you're supposed to treat him just like a citizen of Israel. So the assumption to be made here, there's a lot of confusion here, is that, well, why would we not do this in America? And we're supposed to just let anybody come in. But that's not true. People that come in are supposed to assimilate according to foreign policy. This is a slave that's coming in to assimilate.
That means speak the same language?
They're supposed to learn the language, yeah.
Everything.
They're supposed to adopt our culture and be American. They're assimilate. So you're not to oppress him, or he's supposed to come into this land and be your brethren, basically. Bondservants is different. Brethren cannot be compelled into bond servitude, but must serve as hired servants. You shall not rule over him with rigor. So you shall not compel him to be a bondservant, and you shall not rule over him with rigor. He's your brother. Brethren can become bondservants due to inability to pay a debt. So if he have nothing, then he shall be sold for his theft. So if you owe a debt and you can't pay, you become a bondservant. You can redeem a brethren who sold himself to a foreigner due to being poor. So if you're just poor and you can't pay your debt back, this is not a crime. But you can be redeemed. So after that he is sold, he may be redeemed again. One of his brethren may redeem him. So they can buy you back, buy your freedom. Brethren bondservants can serve for 6 years only. The 7th year they are to be set free. This is the year of release. We'll go over when we get to that commandment. When free from service, the master shall furnish him liberally from all his property. Thou shalt furnish him liberally out of thy flock, and out of thy floor, and out of thy winepress. When free from service, he shall depart with the same marital status at the start of his service. So if he was married when he came in, he stays married. If he was not married when he came in, he leaves not married.
What if he came in not married while he was in?
We're going to get to that right now. I've tried to cover all my bases. I really have. Bondservants can choose to stay with their master to keep his wife and children. So if you came in single and got married,
And then had kids.
that's a property right to the master, not to you.
That's right.
He gave that family to you. You can stay a bondservant. Now, a bondservant's not a bad thing, you guys. We think differently about it than we should. I will not go out free. He says, you should bore his ear with an awl, and he shall serve him forever. If you strike a bondservant and he dies, you shall be punished. If a bondservant is permanently injured by his master, he shall be set free. Talks about losing a tooth or for his eye's sake. So if he's permanently injured, he shall be set free.
What do we do after that?
I'm going to get to that in just a minute. Hired servant. We're going to talk about all 3 of these in just a minute. Hired servants. The wages of hired servants must be paid daily. The priest servant may eat of the food from the altar. So if a priest buys a servant, then they can eat of the food of the altar. They're part of his household. So this isn't a slave like we think of. You are not to oppress the hired servant that is poor and needy. He is worthy of his wages. So those are the 3 servant statutes. Based upon the previous description of servant and slave, we can make a few determinations. What is going on here? Slavery. A slave is a captive of war. They were given the chance to surrender or die. When we go to war, we're supposed to proclaim peace unto it. If they answer of peace, then they are tributaries and they shall serve you. That's where a slave comes from. But if they don't make peace, then you shall kill them by the edge of the sword. Everybody dies, so they had an option. They're going to war with you, that's where a slave comes from. They chose to surrender and be a slave. So this is a better option for them. What America did was not slavery, but kidnapping or man-stealing. We didn't do this. We didn't go to war with anybody. We just stole people's property rights and made them our slaves. But it was already illegal. It was called kidnapping or man-stealing. We already had laws against that. We just didn't enforce it. That's what happened in early America. Servants are different. A servant is someone who is paid, has a sabbatical, has injury protection, has employee rights, and receives a severance package. All those were put in scriptural terms. Does this sound familiar? If you work for wages and have an employer, you are what the scripture calls a servant. That's all the bonds. Now, a servant could be bonded or hired. Bonded is a contract by specialty to pay a certain sum of money. If you owe a debt, you're bonded to pay it. You have 6 years to pay it off or to the year of release. Hired means to stipulate for the labor or services of another. Most of us, if we're a servant or we're employed, we're a hired servant. What we don't do in America that we should do is bond servitude and slavery. And that's harming us. This is the difference between strict liability and limited liability. That's what we're talking about here. We've changed from strict liability to limited liability, and it's causing us a huge damage in America. I just copied this from an article I wrote on my website. It just worded it better, so I'm just going to read it. The law of God endorses strict liability, while America has moved from strict liability to limited liability. The difference between the two is significant. When one is convicted of a crime or sin, the scripture makes the guilty party solely responsible. He has to pay in full. If he does not have the means to do so, he will have to sell himself into bond servitude to the damaged party and make a full restitution. This status is not permanent, for the enslaved must be released every 7 years. This is the law of the year of release. Bond servitude in the scripture has a purpose. That purpose is to make full restitution to the damaged party. In America, if a criminal cannot pay, he is placed in prison, and everyone in America now has to pay for his life in prison. This causes the population to have to pay for his crimes. This is why God does not allow for prisons. Instead, bond servitude makes the guilty party solely responsible. We pay for our own sins, our own crimes under God's law. Without slavery or bond servitude, we cannot have freedom. And slavery is a social status God created, and it's for our protection. Why should we have to pay for someone else's crime? That person should. This is the difference between communism and common law. What is this phrase for communism? To each according to his need, from each according to his ability. It's equalizing everything out. That's what we're doing. We'll just all pitch in to pay for it, not make the one person pay for it. That's the difference here. Common law is God's way, and it's harsh and it's brutal if you're the one guilty, but it's not if you're following God's law. It's a beautiful law to righteous people, to people who want to obey God and keep His commandments.
Is people personally accountable?
It actually does. That's exactly what God wants. Now we can have public bond servants. The government can own people. But I can't have a personal bond servant to pay me back when I'm wronged. We have limited liability. It's called insurance. There's a limited amount that we can have. It's not going to go over that amount. If the amount's $500,000, I'm damaged $1 million. I only get $500,000 because that's what the insurance mandates. That's what it says. So it's called limited liability. God, He endorsed strict liability. He said, "You shall pay, and if you can't pay, you work it off." And that corrects your society. That's what it does. And what happened is we've lost a lot of our rights as a result. The land Sabbath. The earth and all things belong to the Lord. That's the first part of the land Sabbath. You shall not remove established landmarks and boundaries. Okay? These are property rights. People have boundaries that mark their property. You shall sow and reap the land for 6 years. But the 7th year shall be a Sabbath of rest. You can't sow or reap the land. The food which grows of itself can be taken by the poor during the land Sabbath. So whatever grows on that 7th year, just naturally, the poor can eat it. But those that aren't poor can't. You shall not harvest the crops that grow of itself. And you shall reap abundantly during the 6th year in preparation for the 7th year. So God's going to provide in the 6th year to prepare for the 7th year. The year of release has 3 statutes. All brethren's debt is to be released on the 7th year. I've alluded to that several times. Every creditor that lends aught unto his neighbor shall release it. A foreigner's debt is not to be released. What kind of foreigner do you think that is again?
Heathen.
It's a heathen. It's a non-Israelite. It's a stranger. It's someone who's not assimilated into your land. It's an illegal alien. That's the correct term. All brethren are to be set free of their servitude. So every 7 years, all debts released, except for foreigners, and your servitude is over. Keep in mind, this is dealing with trades. Okay? Like me, I might not be as valuable being a teacher. No one wants to hire me to go teach. You know what I'm saying? That's a Roman civil thing. But if you're a contractor and you have a real skill, look how bad I'm talking about myself. But if you have a real skill that's marketable, you don't have to take that upon yourself. What you might do is go and sell that slave to someone who needs him and can use that skill. So let's say it's an electrician, and they've got a skill that can do a whole building somewhere. You know what I'm saying? They got 6 years to make that work. Or however many are left from the land Sabbath. But it's not what am I going to do with this guy? I don't need an electrical work. I need this. Well, you go sell them to someone else, and you get your money, and you hire someone to do that. It sounds bad. We're selling people, but that's the reality of what it is. I mean, that's just the way it worked. And they did it over and over again. So there's ways to make it work, and we're supposed to work within that system. But there is always the chance you don't get everything. But the year of release is far more valuable for what it provides than what we give up. And we'll get to that in a minute. The year of Jubilee is different. The land is not to be sold forever. We're not supposed to be selling land. And a Jubilee is to be observed at the end of every 7 land Sabbath. That's 49 years. The Jubilee is to start and be proclaimed on the Day of Atonement. So the Day of Atonement is when it starts. You shall blow the shofar to announce the Jubilee. On the year of Jubilee, you shall return every man to his land. The Jubilee is about land. There's plenty of land for everybody.
Where?
Have you driven by Nebraska or Iowa or?
We're not in Israel either.
I know. There's a problem with some of the laws that have happened. In the 60s, it's called the Homestead Act.
Right.
They got rid of being able to homestead. America claimed all the land. Now the government owns it, and we have to buy it from them, or it's not available to us. So it's correct. We can't just go out and stake our land, but that's the way God wants it to be. He wants us to spread. He doesn't want us to populate in cities like we're doing. He wants us to spread. And not following the year of Jubilee and the year of release is the reason for that. All those in slavery to another are to be released from their contract and allowed to return to their family. Now, this is also a year of release. You shall not sow or reap on the Jubilee, but you shall eat the increase gathered in the previous years. You are to buy and sell according to the Jubilee year. So your buying and selling should reflect how many years are left when you're dealing with land. You and your family may redeem your land if you pay the price of the number of years remaining. So you can redeem it if you're thinking 50 years. How much is that worth? You have to prorate it and deal with the price that way. If the land is not redeemed, it remains in the hand of the purchaser until the Jubilee. Houses in a walled city may be redeemed within 1 year. Walled cities are treated differently. If a house in a walled city is not redeemed within 1 year, it shall belong to the purchaser forever. So you can sell city houses. Houses in villages with no walls shall be returned in the Jubilee. So a suburb or a village is a lot like living on the land, living out in the middle of nowhere or farming or something like that. The Levites may redeem their land or houses at any time. And the Levites' land in the suburbs cannot be sold. It is theirs perpetually. So the Levites have some extra protection. What is going on here? Let's quickly take a look here. A quick summary. God owns all the land. That is just a fact across the world. Our governments know it. They act accordingly. Property has never been assessed or taxed in America. Never. We call it a property tax, but it's not a property tax. It's a tax on what comes from the property. That's the only thing they can tax. They've never been, you just can't do it. Property, God does not allow property tax. Even though we want to call it that, if you read what it says, I should have put it up here, it's not a property tax. It's not a tax on property. We lease the land, and it has to be returned. Every 7 years, debt is to be forgiven. This includes everything except the land. The land goes to the Jubilee. America still has a 7-year bankruptcy law. This is where this comes from under the common law. That's the way they construed it. It wasn't correct. But when you don't know when the year of release is or the land Sabbath, how do you know how to do it? They just picked 7 years. It's close, but not quite right. So under the common law, you always get your 7 years. Every 50 years, all land is to be returned. Land is our inheritance. It stays in the family. If you've homesteaded and you're going out and working on your land, it will come back, even if you've lost it for some reason in the year of Jubilee. But who loses out? Well, probably the person that lost it. Hopefully the next line coming in will do a better job. But land is very important. It's sacred to God. It stays in the family. But every 7 years, debt's cleared. What this is for, it stabilizes the economy. Does America need that? If we declared a land Sabbath or a Jubilee, America's problems would disappear. It balances the budget every 7 years. That is the whole point. Everything's wiped clean. Does not America need to do this? Are we not reaping the consequences for not doing this? Yes. That is the whole purpose. It relinquishes you of your personal debt and gives you a fresh start, and the nation of debt. This would solve all of America's financial problems right now. To sum up all that, that's basically what it's for. To solve our debt problems. If we did it, we wouldn't have these debt problems. So a quick conclusion, you shall not steal. America still keeps this law with a few exceptions. For example, money. We're using an unjust weight and an unjust measure. Article 1, Section 10, we've got it right. We're just following the wrong. We have a just weight, 1 ounce of silver, a just measure, 90% silver. Our government follows this. The reality is our government follows this.
We don't.
The Federal Reserve is a private bank. They make paper money. U.S. government still mints gold and silver. The U.S. stopped minting gold in 1933 and silver in 1964. In 1977, Congress repealed the ban on private ownership of gold. In 1986, Congress reintroduced gold to America. The U.S. started minting gold and silver coins. We have a choice, but we're choosing Federal Reserve notes. The problem's not our government's problem, it's our problem. We chose to do it. That's what we need to start accepting, is it's the people's problem. The government follows where the people are going. We chose a different monetary system, and that monetary system is based on debt. It's not based on property like it should be. The rich rules over the poor, and the borrower is servant to the lender. The Federal Reserve notes, we already went over that. It's a promissory note. We promise to pay. payment of debt, or a discharge of debt. We're discharging debts instead of paying debts. And that's our problem financially. And you can see what happened since 1933. Our debt has just skyrocketed, and it's going to keep going, and it's never going to change until we go back to the gold standard, because you cannot pay a debt unless you're using gold and silver. If you're using paper money, the debt's always going to be there. It does not get rid of the debt. And our law just straight out says it. It doesn't get rid of the debt. Our new monetary system is based on debt. When we discharge a debt, the debt still exists. Usury is the compensation which is paid by the borrower to the lender or the debtor to the creditor for its use. Usury is the illegal profit which is required and received by the lender of a sum of money from the borrower for its use. Here's what's happening. In California, the maximum of 10% interest per year. But the Supreme Court ruled in 1978, credit card companies can charge out-of-state customers interest based upon home state laws. So all of our credit card companies are from South Dakota and Delaware. The two most common credit card business locations have unlimited usury laws. Wow. Do you see what happened in 1978? Yep. Because they can do it now out of state, everyone moves to those two states and they have unlimited usury laws, and now they can, Now this is irrelevant because it's our choice to join that system. We chose to use credit. Inheritance, I'm going to talk more about this next week. We lost our inheritance with a marriage license, which I haven't talked about, but our inheritance was in this one. But it's damaged because we got marriage licenses, and we threw away all of our inheritance because of that. And restitution, we changed from strict liability to limited liability, and that took away most of our rights. Because we refuse to be responsible for our debts, we want someone else to be responsible for our debts. Do you see the problem it creates? We're not going to go to jail or be punished for something that we didn't do. If we're just cautious and responsible, we wouldn't have to worry. But we've been conned into believing that, hey, we need to be careful. We need limited liability. We need insurance. So let's leave God's law and go to limited liability.